Hi everybody! You might remember that the fire effect created using particles in Godot 4 was one of the first tutorials I published on this channel. Since then, more than a year has passed. The Godot engine has evolved a lot, and many things have changed in the editor as well. So the original video is no longer very usable with the latest version of Godot, which is currently 4.4. That's why I decided to create a new, up-to-date and improved tutorial, which we are about to dive into. Okay, let's start by creating a brand new 3D scene into which we'll then insert the particle system. Let's name it something like 3D Fire. So I'm right-clicking on the scene folder, create new scene, and as I said, it would be 3D. I'll call it 3D Fire, and that's it, I guess. Okay. And now we'll add a child node of type GPU particles 3D. Where is it? GPU. Yeah, here it is. And name it Fire. Actually, we could have created the entire scene as a GPU particles 3D node, making it a root node. However, for the purposes of this tutorial, it's better to do it this way, since we'll be gradually adding more elements to the scene. Anyway, as you can see, there are some warnings next to the node Fire. This is because in order for the particle system to work, we need to assign at least one draw path to render the particles and a process material to handle their lifecycle. I'll get to that in a moment, but first I'll tidy up the scene a bit so that we can get a clear view of the Fire. So clicking View and Gizmos, I'll deactivate GPU Particles 3D. So the cloud is gone, and I think I can get rid of the origin as well. Yeah, yes, and maybe great. So it's not there to block the view. And one more thing, I can switch to this icon, show list of cyclable nodes of positions clicked. And now nothing is there, only just this little dot, which indicates where the fire will be created. Okay, so let's open Fire in the inspector. I think it's already there. And start by adding a new particle process material in the process material section right here. New particle process material. Okay, now we also have the option to use a shader material here, which we would choose if we wanted to control particle behavior using a particle shader. I haven't used that type of shader yet, but I'll definitely get to it at some point. I mean, in the future, of course, not now. For now, this setup is enough, and we'll also add a pass 1 into the draw passes. Let's just collapse that, and in draw passes, I will add pass 1 and new quad mesh. Okay, and something is already here. In the inspector, we can see that we have 8 particles in the amount property, each with a lifetime of, in the time section, of 1 second. And they are all falling downward because the particle system has default gravity enabled. It's probably best to continue by disabling that gravity and instead using a vertical and instead using the vertical velocity so that the particles will rise upward, just as we'd expect from fire and smoke. So let's click on the particle process material, this one, to open its parameters. Alright, and here we can already see the first difference from the original video, which I recorded back when I was using Godot 4.0. While the parameters used to be organized more or less linearly in one long section, now they are divided into categories and subcategories. So sometimes we have to do a bit of searching before we find what we need. But it's easy to get used to, I guess. Gravity can be found in the accelerations section. Right here, acceleration, gravity, and I will disable the negative 9.8, which simulates the Earth's gravity, and set it to 0. Okay, excellent. The free fall has stopped, and now we want the particles to rise upward. To do that, we need to set the initial properties of each particle, which can be found in the spawn section and the velocity subsection. We need to configure direction and initial velocity. So I'll set direction to, I think, 0, 1, 0, as we want to rise it just along the y-axis. And the velocity, let's create a range. So it's taken randomly from the interval 1 to 2. Okay, it appears that the particles, let me just rotate the camera, that the particles aren't rising straight up, but with some deviation in the horizontal direction. This will be useful later for the smoke, but for the fire, we want it to stay in the straight path for now. So let's reduce spread, this property, to 0. Okay, notice that when I rotate the camera, the angle at which we see the particles changes, and from certain angle we see nothing because we are looking at their backside, which is not rendered. To make our future fire visible from all sides, we need to set the billboard mode. So let's go back to draw passes. Where is it? Here, draw passes. I'll click our first pass, and we need to assign a new material. So it would be a standard material 3D. Let's click it again and scroll down to the bottom where we can find the billboard section. And I'll set the mode to particle billboard and keep scale to on. Okay, so as we can see, the camera issue is resolved. If I rotate it, we can still see it from the front view. However, and anyway, I set keep scale to on because if I didn't, later the shaping using the scale parameters would have no effect. However, another issue has appeared, lighting. As you can see, the light source changes the intensity and shading based on the position, on its position, which is probably not something we want our fire to do. So let's open the shading section, and here it is, and set shading to unshaded. Okay, excellent. Now the particles look all the same, no matter what light is shining on them or from which angle. We can move on. Another important parameter is enabling use as albedo, which should be in the vertex color. Let's do it. Without this setting, we wouldn't be able to apply color gradients later in the particle process material. As you may know, in the original tutorial we made do with a basic quad mesh, just a square like you can see right now. This time, however, I'd like to a slightly nicer effect, so we'll use a suitable texture, which we can either create in a graphic tool or download. I am not very good at drawing, so I used a great add-on that I definitely recommend to everyone. So let's switch to AssetLib at the top and search for Kenny. Okay, and we got a lot of results. All of them are great products because they are excellently made, and as we can see, they are almost all of them, they have a CC0 license, meaning public domain. This means we can use them for any purpose without being tied to any conditions, including for commercial projects. Specifically, we are interested in this one, Kenny Particle Pack. Where is it? Here. Let me click that. We can see that this pack contains plenty of icons that are perfect for particles. And down here, we can even see examples of smoke and something like fire. I already have this pack installed, so I won't do anything else, but all you need to do is to click this download button and confirm a few additional dialogues to have it installed into the add-ons folder, which we can see here. Here it is, and the particle pack and all the icons. So let's return to the 3D editor, and I will search for, I think it was Flame 01 PNG, and I'll drag it to the albedo section, namely the texture property. Let's do it. Here we go. And immediately we can see that we'll need to set a transparent background in this image. In the transparency section right here, let's set transparency to alpha. Now that's better. And the blend mode, let's change to add, which will be useful for enhancing the colors in the individual layers of the fire. Okay, and that's much better. However, you'll probably notice another problem. All the particles look all the same exactly. We'll try to improve this by setting a random rotation for each particle. This is done with the angle parameter in the spawn section. So let's scroll up to the particle process material. And here in the spawn section, as I said, angle. And to cover the entire circle, let's set the interval to negative 180 and 180. Okay, this looks pretty good. It would look even better if the particles rotated during their lifetime as well. For this, we'll use the animated velocity category down here in specifically the angular velocity subcategory. Let's set the interval again to negative 180 and 180 and 1. Okay, now it's rotating. Cool. I think it's time to shape the actual fire. We'll definitely want more than the standard 8 particles. So let's set an amount to, for instance, 500. And let's just zoom out, and the randomness, here it is, to the maximum value 1. All right, so we have some fluctuations in the lifetime. Of course, we need to further shape that white column. Let's go back to the particle process material here, and in the scale section, scale section is, where is it? Lifespan, unlimited acceleration. Of course, in display we have scale section. Let's create a new scale curve. New curve texture, click it, and let's make a new curve. So for example, I think the pretty nice shape would be if we create a new point here at point 25 roughly, and then drag both edge values to 0. And here we go. This already looks almost like the fire I showed at the beginning of the video. Now we should give it proper coloring, ideally in a way that the color shades change with position and time, just like in a real flame. So let's scroll down a bit and open the color curves here. Here we'll use 3 properties. We start with color, where we set the base color of the file, something orange. In the example I showed at the beginning, I used a color with the RGB code, I think it was D06B and 40. Yeah, this is it. Nice color. Notice how the areas with the higher concentration of particles appear brighter. This is due to the additive blend mode we set in the transparency section. Just to bring it up, it is here, blend mode set to add, because if I set it to the default mix, it is completely different. Okay, let's get back to add, and let's go back to the color curves, because a simple color won't be enough for us. We'll use another parameter called color ramp, which makes the color of each particle change over time. I saved this gradient as a resource after creating it, so I'll just load it to save time. I think quick load. Or didn't I do that? Oh no, I didn't. Interesting. Okay, so let's do it manually, which is, I guess, better. So create a new gradient 1D, click it again, and click the gradient, and now we simply use it like this, clicking on these separators and then set the color. So I think it should be something like orange as well. Yeah, this is fine. And let's add more separators. So I'm clicking somewhere between other separators and click, and I think this one could be a bit yellowish. Yeah, sure, why not? This one. And let's add one more and go back to the orange shade. Okay, this is pretty cool gradient, I guess. All right, and what about the third parameter, which should be, which one? Emission curve. Let's use it to enhance the final effect. So I'll create a new curve texture again. New curve texture, or is it here? Click it and new curve, click it again. And this time we can set a simple smooth transition from 0 to 1. So the first point is here and the second one is here. So the color intensity gradually increases over time. Okay, we can continue. And there is one more thing. I forgot to mention the local chords parameter, which should be up there in the drawing section here. Drawing and local chords. To do that, demonstrate, I'll just get back this gizmo and rotate the camera so we have the x-axis over here. Okay, so it's turned off by default. Where is it? Here. It's turned off by default, which is probably our preferred way in this case, because it allows us to create nice effects with the flame movement like this. Can you see how it follows the movement? It's pretty cool. On the other hand, if we enable this parameter and do it again, we can see everything will move, including the particles that are already active. So let's just disable that. Okay, I think I get back to the origin. All right. So in practice, we decide based on what we expect from our effect in a specific situation in the game. Okay, so that would be the fire, and what about smoke? Let's just get rid of the gizmo again. And so we need to add a new particle system. We could simply duplicate the fire node and modify the copy, but that would risk accidentally changing some of the shared resources used by the fire, like all the curves, gradients, and so on. It's safer to add a new node and set it up from scratch. This time it will go faster since we don't need to explain every step in such detail. I'll only stop to cover the differences. So let's do it. Right click, add child node, GPU particle 3D. Let's rename it to smoke. Okay, and I'll set the basic parameters. So again, here we go, particle process material, particle new particle process material. And we can set the angle and velocity and other things. So I'm clicking that, and let's go to spawn. Angle is again from negative 180 to 180. Velocity, here it is. Direction up again, so 0, 1, 0. All right. Now the spread. This time we want some kind of spread, but not too wide. I think the best value I found was 10 degrees. Very well. And the initial velocity, I think the smoke should be a bit slower than the flame particles. So let's make it initial velocity, here it is, from 0.5 to 1. Very well. Let's go to accelerations in accelerations and gravity. Let's disable the default gravity, set it to 0, 0, 0, and we can continue in throw passes. As we know, we need to create at least one pass, so again it would be quad mesh. Now we can see the particles right here. And again, I think what we need to do is to click and create a new standard material 3D, click again. And in transparency, we will use the alpha channel, and the blend mode would be add again. Now in the shading, we want to disable the shading mode, so it would be unshaded, and use as albedo in the vertex color. Click. All right, and yeah, sure. Texture, we definitely don't want to use these quads, these squares. So again, I think in our downloaded pack, it was Smoke 01. Where is it? Here it is, Smoke 01. Let's drag it to the texture. Okay, and here we go. And of course, particle billboard. So I go back to the process material. No. I think it's here in the material in draw passes. So billboard, particle billboard, and keep scale on. Okay, but definitely the smoke shouldn't start at the same point as the fire. So let's bring back the gizmo and put it a little higher. Something like this. Okay, that should be fine for the time being. And of course, just like with fire, we'll increase the number of particles to 500. Now this is some smoke. Definitely needs more tweaking. And it should also rise to a greater height. So let's increase the lifetime from 1 second to 5 seconds. 5. Now it's better. And we'll of course add some rotation to the particles. So let's set animated velocity in angular velocity to our usual range, negative 180 and positive 180. So as I said, animated velocity, angular velocity, and this and this. Okay, but the smoke is still too bright, I guess. So let's set its color to, yeah, of course, yeah, sorry, scale. I forgot about the scale. So let's go down to display and scale. And this time, I think we can make do with a simple range. We don't need to set up the curve. So let's add some variability and make the interval from where is it here? 0.1 to 1. All right. Looks a bit better, but as I wanted to say, the smoke is still too bright. So let's set its color to gray and add a gradient in display color curves here. So first I will use some gray value like this one. Looks pretty cool. And the color ramp, it might not be necessary, but let's do it. Color ramp, and I don't know, let's move it here. Yeah, it's look better, a bit more smoky. Okay, so the smoke already looks quite usable, but let's fix one more detail. Notice when I zoom out the camera, here you can observe it pretty nice. The particles which reach the end of their lifetime simply disappear. This isn't ideal, and we'd prefer if they just faded away. Luckily, we can use the alpha curve, this property, exactly for this. So let's do it. I will open that, create new curve sector. I don't know why Godot always scrolls up when I do that. So let's find it again. Here it is. Click, open the curve and new curve. Okay, and smoke completely disappeared because the default setting of this curve is just 0 at all points, which means full transparency. Let's improve it by setting a gradual decrease in value from 1 to 0. Okay, now it's pretty cool. And this time, I guess we are completely done. We can still enhance the entire effect with a black background so we could observe the smoke better. This is just too bright on bright. I think we can simply add a new world environment into the scene tree, world environment, create, and we need to assign a new environment. Click and let's simply change the mode to custom color. And now it's perfect. It's probably not the most realistic. What is this? Some kind of shader. Sorry, doesn't belong here. Most realistic fire and smoke, and there are many details that could be improved. However, I think it served its purpose as a tutorial on using particle systems in Godot 4.4 or higher. Thank you very much for watching. As I mentioned, there are many ways to improve this kind of effect. For example, we could use an animated texture, which would make the individual particles look much more lively than just rotating. Or we could use an appropriately chosen shader, but that would be a bit more complex. For understanding the basic principles, this should be enough. And if you manage to create an original and good-looking combination of parameters, I would love to read about it in the comments or on Discord. So once again, thanks a lot, take care, good luck with your projects, and I'll see you in the next video.